Hi folks, welcome to this Friday's lunchtime Chu and Chat. It's all things about the City Council and the city that we live in and what we're doing. So some of you may know already from joining us for the previous 2 weeks that the reason why I decided on doing this format is because from this year there was less events to go out to. We couldn't have anything here in the Mansion House. There has been no events whatsoever in the Mansion House, so we couldn't do the engagement and outreach that we wanted to do. But I was also very conscious that a lot of people were working from home, trying to find out what's going on in their city, and all they could see was sometimes just the headlines, and they didn't really know, well, who does what, or how are things changing and how are things improving. So I wanted to make sure that yourselves get the transparency and also the answers you wanted, but on top of that, that there's a tie-in. So there's currently 100 of you yourselves. There's probably going to be more. Last session there was close to 200, and the session before. We are open to Q&As, and what happens is through the conversation I will be asking about questions. I may not reach everyone's questions, just to warn you. It's quite hard with up to 200 people. So what happens is, if you have any questions that's not being answered, please email lordmayor@dublincity.ie. That's lordmayor@dublincity.ie, and we will try to get it answered for you that way. But we will try to read as many as possible out and get them answered live as well. So if you have a question, just go down to the bottom of the screen for the chat box and ask your question there. So today we have Richard Shakespeare, Assistant Chief Executive for Planning, Property, Culture and Economic Services. We have Les Moore, who is our Head of Parks, Biodiversity and Landscaping. And we have Tony Flynn, who is our Executive Manager for Culture Economic Services. And in case people are wondering, and I know it's been asked already, being International Women's Day, why didn't I get more women on the panel? Well, we need more women in Dublin City Council, but we do have some really good female leaders in DCC coming in the coming weeks. So it didn't happen for this week, but it will happen for the future weeks that we've already planned and asked them to be part of. This week, I was quite conscious that there was a top question that kept on being asked, which was the whitewater rafting, and I wanted to get the man or the team behind it to come and answer it for you. So first and foremost, we have Richard Shakespeare, our Assistant Chief Executive. Richard, I'm going to come into yourself for just a 2-minute on what you do, what your role is, and what you see is the biggest thing that has changed in our city during COVID.
Okay, thanks, Lord Mayor, and good afternoon, everyone. My role is that I'm responsible for the operation of the planning function in Dublin City Council, along with the management of city estate. And then that'll be more, that side of the house is more the regulatory side of things. And then on the, what would be this perceived to be the good news side of the house would be the culture, recreation, economic services. So I work with Tony and Les in terms of the delivery of those services. And we try to set the ambition in terms of the facilities that we provide. And as the Lord Mayor said, one of those would be the whitewater raft. The other is Dalymount Park, and there are a couple of big projects that we want to try to get going. So you might say the day-to-day side of things is leading a team of very dedicated people, everything from the city librarian, Mairead Owens, to Les, to Tony, to the city planner, John O'Hara, to deliver, and Greg Swift on the economic side of things. But basically to lead that team to deliver, and there's approximately, I think, about 1,300 staff between both sides of the house, and the revenue budget is probably close to 110 million, and that's the day-to-day budget. And then the capital program, Tony will probably call me wrong here, but you might say there are multiples of that. There's probably 500 or 600 million sorry, 300 to 400 million on that. So other than that, I mean, my background is I'm Like Les, I'm a trained horticulturalist who had worked in parks up until about 20 years ago. Then I moved on into the administrative side of things. So that's me. And I'm here in Dublin City Council about 4 years.
Well, I'm about to then move on to Tony and Les and ask what kind of boss you are actually. So Tony, give us a bit about your background and what you do. And you can answer if you want whether Richard is a good or bad boss. Like this is a safe space for you.
Thanks a million, Lord Mayor. And yeah, just to follow on from Richard, I suppose my role, I'd be called a piece of the furniture in Dublin City Council. At this stage, I left school and I commenced my service in the council in 1982, would you believe, as a trainee horticulturalist all those years ago, and moved on from then. I've worked in many departments, and I suppose from a senior management role as an executive manager. My first postings there were the area management roles of the southeast area and the south central area, where I would have been heavily engaged and involved in a significant amount of, I suppose, diverse projects from, as you well, all the citizens know, from just providing and coordinating services, from anything from, flooding, cutting leaves, right through to very large regeneration projects such as Dolphin House, St. Michael's Estate, etc., over many years. I then moved into the housing department, back to the housing department, I should say, for a period of time as Director of Housing Delivery. And I have subsequently moved over now to Culture, Recreation and Economic Services about 18 months ago. It's a very diverse department, as Richard has just outlined. Is he a good boss? He's a hard taskmaster, that's a fact. He is quite clear in his direction, and he just wants people to get on with it and get the job done. So in the context and the constraints of what we have here in Culture, Recreation and Economic Services, is we have a revenue budget, as Richard said, of around 83 millions, which provides a wide and diverse provision of services, which includes all our cultural, arts, libraries, events, parks, economic services, local employment services, international services, twinnings, etc. And now we're moving ahead with our new European strategy to, I suppose, evolve into how we can be a much more resilient and recovery place, i.e. the City of Dublin, moving forward for the next 7 years.
Well, Tony, I'm going to bring you back. I'm going to bring Les in now, but I'll bring you back to that, because I think a lot of people see City Council and they see kind of the 1 billion budget and they go, what the hell are you guys doing? Where is the money spent? How does it actually work? Why is it that there's bins not collected if you have that much money? So all that. So I'm not going to Les, but I might come back then afterwards and ask you, in a way that you're able to do, allowed to do it, how is it, in simple terms, to break down those services so people understand better of where the money goes in DCC? Les, the man behind all the parks for the last while now at this stage, and one that has benefited us massively during COVID. Tell us a bit about yourself, what you do, your team, and the challenges that you've seen this year.
Well, Lord Mayor, I'm a horticulturist and a landscape architect. I've worked with the former Dublin County Council, South Dublin County Council, Dunleary Rathdown for 9 years before I came to the City Council, which was actually 9 years ago as well. So I'm in the City Council for 9 years now. My role obviously is the management of parks and the facilities and amenities within that, which range from tea rooms to playgrounds to playing fields, a wide range of amenities. We also manage the natural areas, so woodlands, the beaches, and obviously the North Bull Island Nature Reserve. which is unique for a capital city to have a nature reserve of that size and importance within a capital city. We've a lot of historic parks, everything from the Georgian, Victorian, Edwardian era, and we've carried out conservation plans for each of those parks, and we're gradually implementing those over a period of time to conserve what's worth conserving. We've a big program of improvement works, everything from developing new parks. We opened Weaver Park in 2017 in Cork Street, Bridgefoot Street Park, again in the city centre, under construction at the moment, will be finished later on this year, hopefully. And we're doing an awful lot of work in the inner city as well in terms of greening, small interventions, small pocket parks, tree planting, just to bring a bit of nature back into the city centre. So we have a lot of projects, and my team is made up of a diverse range. We've, a great admin team. I know they're listening in, so I need to say that. We've landscape architects, horticulturists, we've an arborist, we've a play development officer, biodiversity team. So we've lots of skills in there in terms of managing what we manage. And
I met some of your team when we were awarded the green flags, actually. So it was amazing to meet some of them and the great work they've done. And again, I think thank you on behalf of this office and a lot of people of the maintenance of parks and kind of the increase of service this year in the parks, because we needed it. We needed it more than any other time we've ever had. Tony, back to you before I land Richard in a few things. Tell me about the funding and spending in DCC and how it works, because again, as I said before, people see a lot of numbers, and when they see headlines, they see kind of the big numbers of what's being spent. How, if I was asking you to kind of break it down quite simply, how would you explain the DCC budget?
Certainly, Lord Mayor. I suppose we've two elements of it. We have our day-to-day spending, which is our annual revenue spend, of which we prepare a budget providing the following services. We provide our library service, libraries, art galleries, the likes of our cultural buildings, City Hall, and staffing of the same. We've Les and parks and landscaping and biodiversity. It's about 20%, 20-odd% of the budget. We've sports and leisure facilities, which is all our leisure facilities, swimming pools, community recreation centres, etc., etc., etc. We've our arts office, we've our economic services and local employment offices. So there's a breakdown of that sum of money, which sums up to 83 million and in excess of about 800 staff. We also have set up, I suppose, a company called the Dublin City Cultural Company, which also provides services to the community, to artists in relation to culture. They manage some of our, I suppose, attractions for us, such as Henrietta Street, Richmond Barracks, Tenement Museum, places like that. We also have a function with regards to tourism. It's a very large function that we work with our partners at Fáilte Ireland, Tourism Ireland, etc., and it's a really, really big, I suppose, give for ourselves to make the city as attractive as possible for tourists to come. So it's really, really diverse, right down to City Hall and facilitating weddings in City Hall. So that's I suppose, in a nutshell, the breakdown of our revenue and the services that we provide within that. On the capital side, which is our rolling program for 3 years, as Richard said, it's in excess of a couple of 100 million. And what we do there is we look at, say, new projects, such as, Daly Mount Park, 36 million euro project. We've tourism projects such as Kilmaine and Mill. We've heritage projects. We've art projects. We have projects to restore the west wing of the U Lane Gallery, right through to significant programs in public realm. And what I mean by that is a Wolf Town Square and places like that we're improving. Les is doing, I'm not going to speak for Les, but Les needs funding for an awful lot of his greening strategies around the place. So we roll that program on, and I suppose the funding that comes to fund that program in the main comes from ourselves, Dublin City Council, by way of development levies, as they're called, and also some, I suppose, development capital. If an opportunity arose where money would come into the city council, it would be possibly set aside for those type of projects. We get very, very little grant aid from central government. Like, take for instance, Brendan was on last week, the housing programme is more or less fully funded. It's the complete opposite over here. There's very, very little comes from that.
Let me stop you on that one, because there's the constant argument from people of, well, we have so many homeless in the city, why can't we provide finance for those services rather than do this project over here or whitewater rafting? What's the simple reply to that?
Well, the simple reply is that homeless services, again, are more or less recovered from central government. 90% of Section 10 funding, that's where that funding comes from for homeless services, is fully funded by central government. So only 10% comes from the 4 local authorities within the region. So that's fully funded. As I said to you, almost all of it's a complete opposite in relation to culture, recreation. All of our projects and our services are more or less funded from internal capital receipts, as we call them.
So bottom line is different budgets, not transferable. So, right. Okay. Richard, I'm going to come to you, since you had the lovely backdrop there, and I'm sure you knew this was coming when you accepted this invite of whitewater rafting. There's constant conversation and debate on it, and I know there's been a lot of discussion on why not spend it on something that is outdoor Lido deck or outdoor swimming pool, especially in light of so many pools closing around the city. Why this facility? Now, I know Dublin Fire Brigade was talking to me about how it's a training centre, which some people don't know. So do you want to give us a brief kind of overview of a minute of it before the specific question?
Yeah, I suppose what it is it's many things. It is an international standard, I suppose, elite slalom, canoe, kayak course. It is a swiftwater rescue training centre. It is a tourist facility for rafting, and it's also a community development piece. And back in the, we're all the time trying to work with at-risk youth and trying to create diversionary programs. And the more exciting those diversionary programs are, the better engagement one tends to get with them and the better outcomes. So, and then you talk about why can't we do a Lido? There's also a swimming pool in the middle of this. And, the Lido, if you're doing a Lido on its own, the costs wouldn't be much cheaper because you have to treat the water, we have to tank the whole area. And we still need changing rooms. You'd still need to do the piece. So I mean, roughly speaking, when you're looking at the project at the moment, the building on the Docklands was a temporary building built by the Dublin Docklands Development Authority. It is in need of replacement one way or the other. It needs to be repurposed to enable us to animate, I suppose, the water on the Liffey anyway. And that's anything from access to the Jeannie Johnson through to access to the various canoeing and kayak operators and stand-up paddle boarders that operate out of sort of the area beside the Docklands office.
And who's paying for this, Richard? Because I know there's a question in the chat there. I've asked one or two through that conversation, but like the question in the chat there is, why not pay it for a museum, or democracy museum was what this questioner asked. But why not put it towards a museum? Why not put it to something else? Why this? But who is specifically going to be paying for it?
Okay, so as with all of our, as Tony said, our capital program within this department, you might say you're trying to do an awful lot of different things with different buildings. So we were successful. We'll be spending 80 million on the Parnell Square Cultural Quarter, which is a library. We'll be spending money on hopefully Kilmainham Mills, which is a heritage project. We'll be spending money on a biodiversity centre on Dublin Bay, out on the Bull Island. We'll be spending money on tea rooms, artist workspaces, a whole range of different things, and a whitewater rafting. And the way these are funded are through levies, through grants, and specific funding from I suppose when you look at the whitewater rafting, it is Department of Housing, Local Government and Heritage for the Swiftwater Rescue piece. It will be for the tourism piece, we'll be looking to funding from Fáilte Ireland. From the sports side of things, it will be through the sports capital funding. So there are different funding streams. So it's this jigsaw funding, and that's, I suppose, the difficulty, unlike housing, where you're getting it from one source. We're having to, for all of those projects, be it Dalymount, Dalymount will be sports, Dublin City Council funding, it will be sports capital funding. Kilmainham Mill will be tourism funding and Dublin City Council funding. The whitewater rafting will be a combination of sport, tourism, Dublin City Council.
I have a question here, Richard, on before I move on to Les about parks. Someone wants to know, can the depth of the pool be developed into a scuba diving training pool as well as a fire emergency service training facility? Yes,
well, I suppose the pool in the centre is the central reservoir that you pump water around the course. So that pool is about 4.5 to 5 meters deep. And once the course isn't in use, it drops by about 6 foot, about 2 meters when the course is in use. So yes would be the answer. It could be. And we do hire out our swimming pools for sub-aqua training. So this would be no different.
Okay, I think there'll be more questions coming in for you on that one in a second. In fairness to Richard, Tony, and Les, so far I've found that anytime I ask a question, they've answered in my year here, and I've had asked Richard plenty of questions during my time in role. Les, I have a few here for you, but I guess going back to the parks and going back to the overall kind of what yourselves have done, what's the main challenges, before we get into some of the questions, but what are the main challenges you see in parks? And I know you and I had talked about outdoor facility space or the lack thereof due to zoning. So what do you see in the next, I guess, 6 months, a year that we need to look at?
Well, I think the main challenge over the last period has been catering for the numbers of people who are using our parks. Particularly parks, I think, the larger parks like St. Anne's, along the coast, those kind of parks attract an awful lot of people, and trying to cater for those in terms of waste management, and, trying to encourage people to social distance, and sometimes it's become too much and the guards have had to come in and close those particular locations. But by and large, we've been able to keep them open to the public throughout the pandemic, and I think that's been a bit of an achievement in itself. I think there are challenges going forward, and one of them is, we're getting constant, and you'd be aware of this, Lord Mayor, requests for playing fields, and while there are 200 playing fields of different sizes around the city, it's not enough to cater for the numbers of people now participating in field sports. So that's something we've highlighted, and we're hoping that we can look at that going forward in terms of how that could be addressed.
Is it a zoning matter? I know you and I discussed it, that in terms of zoning, in terms of the development plan, that there's more to be done there. Like, what do you think we all should be looking at, or that people should kind of feed into in terms of kind of playing fields and outdoor facilities?
Well, there's two areas really. One is that we look to protect playing fields where they are in existence at the moment. Obviously, if there's a valid case for those to be used for other uses, and if there's a lot of other playing fields around, not every playing field has to be kept. But we do need to look at how we can protect playing fields going forward. And then look to provide areas of new areas of playing fields, maybe out around the M50, that kind of area. But anyway, that's something we're going to be looking at as a forward planning project.
And talking of green spaces, I guess the question here is, like, the smaller local green spaces are maintained by third-party companies. Many feel that these would be better maintained by DCC. Is there a strategy for that in terms of maintaining these green spaces back to in the hands of DCC?
Well, all of our parks, our main parks, are maintained by direct labour, by our own staff. And, you know, we've acknowledged the skills of our own staff. Obviously, they go through training. We've got qualified gardeners who supervise all the work. So all of our main parks are maintained by direct labour. There are some smaller outside areas and roads and more incidental open spaces that are maintained by contract. But, you know, I'm happy to say that by and large, most of our parks are maintained by direct labour, and that's something we want to maintain.
Okay, and someone was asking here in terms of biodiversity, it was disappointing to see chemical sprays in city parks. Has this changed?
Well, there's no chemicals being used in city parks. We eliminated the use of glyphosate over the last 2 years. And in fact, it was in our biodiversity action plan from 2016, I think, one of our actions was to eliminate the use of glyphosate in Dublin City. And we're happy to say we've achieved that. And even our colleagues in roads have eliminated the use of glyphosate. So we can say that there's no glyphosate or chemicals being used in city parks.
Okay, there's a load of questions for you on parks, so I'm going to move to Tony before I move back to yourself and Richard. Tony, you mentioned weddings in City Hall. Emma, I'm not going to name surnames because this is being recorded, wants to know, has there been any good feedback or any feedback in terms of work being done there, just for the staff?
Yeah, it's been, I suppose, quite challenging for everybody. Most of all, I suppose, the bride and groom has been really, you know, in the context of hopefully the greatest day of their lives, for the rest of their lives, and their family has been severely curtailed. And I suppose what we've had to do, and the staff of City Hall had to do, was I suppose completely and utterly review and revise how we carried out, I suppose, our services and our duties to the users of City Hall for weddings. So it's been a challenge for everybody, and it's a particular challenge now because I suppose the selection of people that can come is you know, it's now 6 people. It's very, you know.
Is there a plan to then change how we provide for services then, Tony, in the city when it comes to kind of culture services, when it comes to kind of wedding, or kind of the proposals, apart from, because we're talking about kind of big spend projects here at the moment, but throughout the city, there's spend on different culture and economic services. Tell us a bit about kind of the ones that are coming into place, that, or the revising of services that you see have happened.
Yeah, certainly. I suppose what you have seen is, I suppose, a change from the on-street experience in the context of how we provide services and how we run events within the city. Like, we're heavily involved, as you well know, in Winter Lights, Bram Stoker, New Year's Eve, St. Patrick's Festival, Hotter Than July, City Spectacular. I suppose taking all that into account, from a culture point of view, if you look at the U Lane Gallery and how that's metamorphosized itself, right from being, I suppose, a visitor experience by going through the front door of the gallery, right through to a virtual experience now on the gallery's website. It's an absolutely fantastic, I suppose, adjustment to move from that experience to a really, really good experience from our feedback of visiting the gallery. In the same way we've been doing moving services across under our health and well-being a partnership. We've launched a virtual hub from next Monday, which basically means that people can register onto the virtual hub, and there's a program, an 8-week program called Change for Life, of which people can go on and they can actually virtually change their life by way of taking on challenges in relation to health and well-being. So we've completely metamorphosized our services Our arts services are the same. Music Town will be going ahead virtually. Buskers Fla will be going ahead virtually. We're in the planning, and we are and have planned for outdoor activity. And I suppose when we know when that will happen and what restrictions are in relation to that, we will amend accordingly as to how they will be developed.
Well,
but as I said, Lord Mayor, that's how we've more or less amended our services.
Tony, in terms of kind of funding for additional services, David here is asking, we've seen some huge changes to the library services as a result of COVID, with events moving online, and you just named a kind of a plethora of things going online. With funding now being in online and digital services, would this continue post-COVID, or is it a case that we plan once COVID, hopefully, touch wood, we see the other end of it, that all these things will be stripped back again, back to, say, the normal that was before? Or will this continue to have both the hybrid of online and hopefully in-person services?
I think the digitalization and transformation agenda has actually moved ahead by 10 years over the last 12 months. And to answer your question, Lord Mayor, there has to be a blend or a suite of services available to everybody. Some people may like the experience of coming to the library or the art gallery or the sports centre, and some people may not, and some people may not be able to. So yes, there will be a blend of I suppose both digital services and other I suppose traditional ways that we would have delivered our services. But certainly the transformation and digitalization of our services is well underway now, and it's going to continue.
That's good to know. I think a lot of people have gotten used to online, and they want the in-person as well, as you say, but a mixture of both will be great. Coming back to you, Richard, tell us more about Dalymount Park. Someone is asking.
Okay, so Dalymount Park, the City Council acquired Dalymount Park in 2016, and worked, and we also acquired Talca Park. And so you've got to read both together. Dalymount being home to a Bohemian Football Club and Shelburne playing out of Talca. And both, I suppose at a particular point in time, both grounds were under threat of being lost from sporting locations. So we were approached back then by the FAI and central government to acquire Dalymount Park and Talca Park, which we did, and we have been working with both clubs in, I suppose, brief design proposals. It's taken a bit longer than we would have hoped, in that we were waiting for large-scale sporting infrastructure funding to develop the, I suppose, the design.
When you say it's taken longer, how long has it been?
Well, I suppose we've been slowed down by about 18 months just in terms of waiting for access to funding. And we would have hoped to have been in probably in the middle of the 2023 football season, but it's probably now likely the start of the 2025 football season. It'll be a Category 3 UEFA stadium, which means it will be able to host European group matches for the Europa League. And it's 6,000 capacity, 4-sided stadium, and the big community piece of infrastructure in the stadium is the new Phibsborough Library will be located within one of the stands, and but it'll also, the whole project will create permeability down along the shopping centre side. That's where the library will be, and so we just need a bit of a wind in our sails to get going. And we need government funding, and then also the sale of Talca Park and the use of the proceeds from that would be the City Council's primary element of the funding of the stadium. It's about at the moment, with contingencies and all of it built in, it's about a 36 million euro project.
And when you say, because a lot of us are concerned always about community pieces, and this is especially with big projects, when you say there's the library piece, is the stadium also going to be available for community training as well, and tie into the community so they have back to that playing space, that piece that Les had mentioned?
no is the honest answer, Lord Mayor. We had looked at a synthetic pitch, but if you put a synthetic pitch in, it can only take so many hours a week and retain its UEFA rating. So you spend money on the synthetic pitch, and so there's a hybrid pitch will be going in. I'm sure we'll be able to cope with finals and community finals and stuff like that, but not the day-to-day stuff, because you got to remember, you will have from March through to the end of October, you have 2 clubs playing there, and that'll be in use every week, every Friday night, and so you need to manage that surface appropriately. But we have been in discussions with TU Dublin and the Grange Gorman campus in terms of access to facilities there, and we're working on a collaborative project with them through the large-scale sporting infrastructure.
Okay, and before I go to Les there, just in terms of the location and all the chat and discussion and concern about whitewater rafting,
yeah,
why not a public consultation on the project?
Well, if you remember, you were part and parcel of that public consultation. The way local authorities do its public consultation is via the Part 8 of the Planning Act, and that's you might say a 20-week process where the arbiters of that are the city councillors. The city councillors overwhelmingly backed the proposal, and yeah, there were fors and againsts on it, so the way that we actually formally consult is through that process. We have to advertise it. We go, and it doesn't matter whether Les is building a new park or a synthetic pitch, it goes through the same process, public consultation process. Any project that's costing over €127,000 that the city council is doing that is capital in nature needs to go through that consultative process.
Yep, and just to be clear to audiences, the protocol that Richard had advised or had outlined there, we did vote on it, and I know I myself voted against it. But saying that any other additional funding asks or proposals comes back to us, but on top of that, one of the things I've noticed working with the team here and working with Richard and hearing more, especially from the external groups for the whitewater rafting, especially from the likes of the fire brigade and also youth groups, that this could be a very good opportunity in trying to tie in with the community and in terms of providing fit for purpose emergency service training. I like to hear more on the discussion, and this is also part of this conversation, why we have these conversations, because you will always see the headline of people saying, oh, for it, against it, but there's always the middle ground in between of talking about, well, why are we doing this and how does it benefit to the city? And hearing that there can be a benefit to the city is the important part. And of course, I fully understand people saying, well, we shouldn't be doing that when we could be funding homelessness, or we could be funding that, but doing it doesn't mean we won't be funding the others as well. So this is why also having yourselves on here for clarity is important.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sorry for cutting across you, Lord Mayor, but I do think as a capital city, we need to have the aspiration to do all of these things. It shouldn't just be one or the other, and we're pitting projects against each other. You know what I mean? That part and parcel of being the capital city is that we should aspire to having all of these things, and what are, potentially unique selling points for the city. And I think, you asked at the very start, and I mean, it's myself, Tony, Les, and other members of the senior team and the councillors to come up with, I suppose, reimagining the vision for the city post-COVID, because, I think people are going to be looking to, utilising outdoor spaces in a different way, and be that on the city streets or the likes of George's Dock. How do we maximise the use of our outdoor spaces, and how can we redesign and co-create with the citizens, you might say, a better city and a more livable city? And there's all of this talk in my other hat on with the 15-minute city, and it is having a lot of amenities, near you. And I saw in some in terms of the playgrounds, I know Les has a strategy in terms of delivering playgrounds so people are not more than I think it's 1.5 kilometers from a playground of some sort throughout the city area. So, you know, I used the expression and got widely sort of derided for using it. You know, we can't have a monochromatic vision for the city. It has to be a blended approach and aspire to delivering on ambitious plans, and wherever those ambitious plans come from.
But Richard, not having, and I agree with you, I don't think we should have a monochromatic approach to things, but I think also, but the concerns that some may have, and also suggestions, it's not even concerns I hear, it's a lot of suggestions of, oh, can we have outdoor Lido, or can we have more, or even the recent thing of having fully funded community pools, making sure things are work. Those are suggestions that are valid and good. And I know
absolutely.
you are happy.
And I mean, you know, we're quite happy, and particularly on the sports side of things, you know, we're quite happy to engage, and we are doing a good bit of research as to what the demands and needs are in terms of indoor pools. I know we have a demand for, you know, sea swimming, and Les would have seen an uptick in that out in Dollymount, and how we can deliver on those things. As I said, it's not binary, and you know what I mean. And for those who think that we shouldn't be spending money on, you know, what might be considered to be, you know, some would see as frivolous projects, you know, because we should be spending our resources on housing. 2/3 of our capital budget is on housing, and 1/3 is on, you know, everything else. You know, the capital program for ourselves in CRES and all of CRES and planning is about 10% of the capital budget.
Okay, Les, I'm gonna go back to you because there's lots of park questions for you actually. So I know someone emailed in, but I can't see the question on my email. So can I just ask the moderators who put it on WhatsApp, if possible, the emailed in question, in relation to the shortage of green recreational space that is open to the public in some parts of the city. While there are extensive amenity spaces owned by schools, religious bodies and sporting bodies, which are currently closed to the public, can the council negotiate with those owners who all receive some form of funding from central government to have them open up to public to relieve some of the pressures on the existing public parks? I don't know, is that to you, Les, or to Tony or Richard?
Well, I can answer part of that, I think, Lord Mayor. Yeah, I think there are opportunities there for lands which are in even, you know, the VEC have lands in different parts of the city as well, which aren't fully open to the public. But there are school grounds certainly, which, you know, we worked on a model I've worked on a model before where facilities can be provided on school grounds and then open to the community as well in the evening time. So the school would have the benefit during the daytime, and the community would have the benefit in the evening time. That could be a difficult thing to resolve if there's antisocial issues to be resolved, and who's going to supervise that. But certainly I think there are opportunities there, and that's something we probably should be looking at.
Okay, and do you think there should be, oh sorry, there's someone first, that there's a plethora of questions. If we don't get to everyone's, can I ask you to email it to lordmayor@dublincity.ie, and we will try to reply. I'm trying to be fair to people asking a few questions. So the woods and ponds are areas of bushy parks that cyclists have indicated that cyclists can pass through in the future. However, the paths are too narrow. DCC hasn't provided clarification on it. Who is liable if someone is injured or hit from behind?
Well, cycling is one of those things that's changed a lot in recent years. I think the parks bylaws still say that there's no cycling allowed in parks. But obviously it is a policy of the city council to promote cycling, and so we are looking. We've actually developed signage which is share with care, Rital Lacurum, which is our, you know, where we have pavements that are sufficiently wide, we can facilitate people cycling responsibly, but also people walking as well. So we've trialed that in Fairview Park, and we're doing it at Albert College Park, and we're going to roll that out to other parks as well. So if you're in a park, that, you know, you can cycle responsibly, but just be respectful of other park users. More recently, there's a new bridge come into Bushy Park from the Rathfarnham side, constructed by South Dublin County Council. And that's raised some issues for us. But again, we've been able to widen the pavement there. And I think it is something that people just get used to ultimately. But it is people acting responsibly and being respectful to others.
When can the access road at Lurk be repaired to resume access to the beach? Hundreds are parking and have been removed recently from Lurk walking, creating chaos.
Well, we stopped car parking on the beach some years ago. I think it was 2016, 2017. And that was following an incident where the emergency services were trying to get access to the beach. They couldn't do so because people had parked in a number of places which interfered with the emergency vehicles. So the guards asked us to stop parking on the beach, which we did. And you know, the beach is not a car park. And overwhelmingly, the feedback we're getting from the public is that it was a positive thing not to allow cars on the beach. So that's not something we're going to look at. There are still, you know, in about 250 car parking spaces and on the Causeway Road at the North Bull Island. And, you know, we think 250 car park space car park is probably sufficient for there.
Okay, and I think last two questions for you before I move to Tony, and then we'll be wrapping up, is the question of dog parks, because will there be more dog runs around the city? I know there's been a ask for increased dog parks, but then on top of that, there's been an increased ask of how do we manage the waste from dogs, and what in terms of enforcement are we going to do, especially in parks?
Well, I remember surveys done in recent years, and the biggest barrier, I suppose, to people's enjoyment of parks has been the issue of dog fouling and dogs off lead. I think, you know, dog owners, you know, they love their dogs and they, you know, they're part of the family, but people who may not like dogs or maybe, you know, afraid of dogs, they don't appreciate them so much. So it is trying to get that balance right. Again, over the period of the pandemic, an awful lot of people are dog owners. In fact, we've got a dog ourselves in our family, so I'm on the other side of that discussion now. But it's very difficult to provide dog parks within the city parks because we don't have a lot of big parks. I know when I was in Dunleary, Rathdown, in Marley and Cappenteely, we were able to dedicate areas just for dogs. But in the city parks, it's more difficult than that. We have one in St. Anne's Park, which works well. But look, we're looking at that policy and seeing whether maybe we designate whole parks in certain areas. Again, within your 15-minute walk or 20-minute walk of your neighborhood, there would be a whole park that you could bring your dog any time of day and run it off lead. So that's a new policy we're going to have to develop in conjunction with dog owners and other park users, because it can be quite contentious.
And I guess this leads me to Tony's question of, in terms of the enforcement side, there's been a couple of councillors that mooted about DNA testing. Actually, I know for a fact the other half here, Patrick Costello, had mentioned it when he was in council. Has there ever been a thought of trying to look at kind of identifying a dog poo? I know that's not something people like talking too much about, but is there a way of doing that kind of tracing to try to discourage people, Tony? Is there plans in terms of services to provide that enforcement?
Not that I'm aware of, Lord Mayor, to be perfectly frank with you. There has been, I suppose, in my time in my different roles in here, several attempts to, I suppose, work with is the word I would use, you know, the dog owners to, be sensible and in most cases, you know, the majority of dog owners are very sensible and they have the pooper scoopers and they bring their stuff with them, etc., etc. But there certainly are other areas I would suggest, and some of them are probably not down to, you know, the dog or the dog owners themselves. It's in relation to the compact city centre, where people are living in, you know, apartments and complexes, etc., etc. And then there's an opportunity, or there has to be an opportunity to get some exercise and recreation in for the dog owner and the dog itself. So, like, what we've tried to do over the years is have those conversations within those settings, where there may be, I suppose, a reduced lack of space there just to do things like that. There is an enforcement process, and that's a fact. And there is and there are fines, and that is the stick, at the end of the day.
Well, we don't have enough wardens, I think, is another problem, though, Tony, because I think the amount.
There are a number of ways that you can designate or delegate that function to facilitate that service, if that's what people want. But then it's another service, and there's going to be a cost to that, and then it's how is that going to be paid for, Lord Mayor? And that's the question that has to be asked. If that's where funding is to go, well then.
I think we do need to look at it. I think it's increased in especially the last year, and it's something we do need to address, Tony. I know yourselves have to have a hard stop at 1:55, so I guess the last questions for you, Richard, before I wrap up with one overall question. There's a lot of issues, and being International Women's Week, I guess two things. One, this is an all-male panel, as I said at the start of this call, and it means that it's definitely shown up that how we need to promote gender equality and how we should promote more, I guess, women into, not even, I guess, definitely into management positions. Can you tell us about some of the opportunities, or who have filled those positions in senior roles that are female? The second thing is there's been a lot of harassment and intimidation of women in not just Dublin, but overall across the world. And we saw it, especially in light of this week's conversation of the horrible case of Sarah Everard in London. How do we make sure our events and culture and parks and everything is through a gendered lens so that it makes people feel safe?
Okay, there's an easy question for me. I suppose in terms of women in leadership positions, the city librarian is Mairead Owens, the city architect, Ali Grehan. You then have Barbara Dawson, who's the director of the Hugh Lane Gallery. You have Eileen Quinlivan, who is the assistant chief executive on the transformation and HR side of things. There are various other women in leadership roles. So it's not as if gender isn't being dealt with. I think it is. You might say, you've also got, I suppose, one of the key positions is Kathy Quinn, who's our finance officer, who we all have to go to her altar as such to get funding. So I think we're well catered for.
But we need to do more.
Oh yes, but I mean, listen, it's not just gender. I think it's the whole piece around diversity, and that it needs to reflect and what society looks like now, as opposed to what society looked like 20 years ago, or 5 years ago, or 10 years ago. In terms of, I suppose, the safety aspect of it, the more people that we get using our facilities, and there are safety in numbers. It's a bit like here today. I feel much safer with Tony and Les in this conversation as opposed to being on my own. But it is no, but you know what I mean. But it is a general thing, and we need to design. And I know Les and his team does, and Tony and his team does, design events safely that people can come and not be harassed. Les, in terms of the designs that they do in their parks, whatever else. That is actually one of the key design components that is brought out. You want to design safety in as opposed to retrofitting safety measures. And it's not about public lighting or anything like that. It is purely and simply about volume of people. You know what I mean? A small example. you know, in terms of the lack of people on the streets at the moment. I jumped into a cab going from Church Street to the civic offices, which is a 10-minute walk. But it was dark. There was nobody on the streets, and I didn't feel safe. You know, so it is a case that, you know, and everybody needs to take a bit of responsibility for their own safety and judge the conditions that prevail at any given point in time. But as a city council, we do our level best to ensure that everything that we do is done to create a safe environment within which people can recreate.
Okay, I think on that note, we also need to create safe environment, but also have an overall knowledge that women, and I know I'm harping on about it at the moment, but I do see genuine fear among women traveling around the city or walking around the city or going to events. And I think this is something that we do need to address as a city. Last question to everyone is your vision for the next 5 years in one sentence. And then you can go.
Okay, well, I'll go first. I suppose
Yes.
it's
I know you have to go, so go.
Yeah, is reimagining the public realm and how we're going to do that. And that will necessitate a little bit of pain, I would say, for vehicle driving people. But I do think, you know, what we're hearing, and the one thing that COVID has presented us with, is an opportunity to reimagine a more livable, friendly city. And that's everything from College Green right the way out through some of our towns and villages in the city.
Okay, and you can go away now. Les?
Yeah, I in 1 second, Lord Mayor, I'd say a greener city. You know, a lot of the initiatives we're taking are going to green the city in so many ways. Some new parks, upgrading existing parks, and a lot of more tree planting as well. So I'd say a greener city.
And Tony, in 1 sentence?
Yeah, very, very similar. You know, city of art, city of culture, city of music, green city. I think that has to be our, I suppose, real vision for the next number of years to facilitate, you know, the resilience and the recovery of this city, and make it a really, really defined location for people to actually live in, visit, or come on holidays to.
Okay, folks, thank you so much. I know Richard had to run to a meeting, but thank you to you both, Les and Tony, and thank you to Richard, and thank you to our audience. We'll see you next week for next week's chat. So thanks a million.